Let me say a thank you to Don Hart and the consort for the beautiful music. Truly wonderful. We're grateful for that. Call your attention to an insert in your bulletin this morning that has a list of the classes that are being offered here on Wednesday nights right now. We have a remarkable lineup of classes, and I just simply want to lift that up. And for the parents that are here, we'll have Daystar Ministries back this week to address the subject of taming the technology monster. Sissy Goff will lead that, and that is certainly a challenge for parents today raising children in a digital age. And then I'll echo what Tom said. We're trying something new on the day that the Titans kick off at 12. We have a 9 o'clock garden service, and thankfully they don't have too many 12 o'clock games. But I told the group this morning that if they start asking for that service on the days when the Titans kick off at 3:15, we're going to have a different conversation with them. So if you are a Titans fan and you want to join us next time there's a noon game, we're in the Garden of Prayer, which is right out here next to the sanctuary. Join me in prayer this morning. Loving God, speak to us through these words of Luke's gospel, this parable, and may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. You are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. As we continue to make our way through Luke's gospel, we are going to be spending some time in the parables. Last week, we briefly addressed the parable of the prodigal son as a part of the 30th celebration of the Jubilation Choir, which was a wonderful Sunday, and some of that music is on our website now, but it was truly a great day, and we had a homily, which is a short sermon, and today we come to the parable of the dishonest manager, which is in Luke 16. And one of the things that strikes me about the parables is that there's not just one message found in these parables. There are multiple messages, and if you read the parables of Jesus over and over again as you grow older, you will find that they speak to you in new and different ways, which is a very incredible thing. And so let me say that here at the outset. I want to begin this morning by focusing on a theme that is certainly present in this parable, and a theme that all of us can think about and reflect upon, and that is the concept of trust. Trust. The owner in this parable loses trust in the manager because he's squandering his wealth. What do you think about trust? How do you know when you can trust somebody in life? Is it just a feeling that you get? Do they have to first go and earn it? When somebody makes the comment, he or she is a good person, what do they mean by that? And how do you get other people to trust you in your own life? When I do premarital counseling with couples, I will often ask them if either one of them have ever been hurt very deeply or badly in their past, if they've ever been cheated on, if they've ever been betrayed. Because what I find is that people who have been hurt badly in their past will bring that hurt or that lack of trust into their marriage. And trust is a big deal. Trust is hard to find, it seems like, in our culture. Just think about the past 5 or 6 years and think about some of the things that have made the news that we hear about. Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. Lehman Brothers going bankrupt. Presidential candidates that make lots of promises on both sides, and then people down the road say, I can't trust them, they didn't keep those promises. The governor of South Carolina goes missing, and he's not hiking the Appalachian Trail, he's in Argentina with his mistress. Cabinet appointees that haven't paid their taxes. The president gets called a liar when he's speaking to a joint house of Congress. John Edwards, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lance Armstrong, the digital antics of Congressman Weiner, and we have to live through that again when he runs for mayor of New York. These things on top of the usual, which is marriages falling apart, family members disappointing each other, friends betraying friends, under-the-table business deals. And so we all find ourselves living in a culture where we are constantly asking the question, whom can we trust in life? Trust is a big deal. It's the currency of relationships. Marriages don't work without trust. Friendships don't work without trust. Business relationships don't work without trust. But trust first has to be earned and then maintained. And what about responsibility? Many would say that responsibility is lacking in our world today. Lots of people don't want to take responsibility for their words and their actions. Lots of people want handouts and free rides in life, and we have a very hard time differentiating between people who are in desperate need and who need to be taken care of and people that are out there working the system. And so that's where a lot of our political debates rage on over issues like that. Personal responsibility does not seem to be on the rise in our culture. In our parable, the parable of the dishonest manager, we have a rich man who finds out that his manager has been dishonest and is squandering away his property. So he calls him in and he tells him that he can no longer be his manager. He doesn't trust him anymore. So the manager, knowing that he is about to lose his job, does something to look out for himself. He goes out to the people that owe his master money and he forgives a large portion of their debt. For one who owed 100 jugs of olive oil, he said, just make it 50. For one who owed 100 containers of wheat, he said, just make it 80. So not only do we have a lack of trust here, we also have some vindictiveness that's present in this parable. But here's the confusing part about this parable. When the owner finds out what the manager has done, Jesus tells us that he commends him for acting shrewdly. Now, we don't really know exactly what he means. Was he shrewd for collecting at least a portion of the debt, or was he shrewd for looking out for himself so that he'd have some friends once he lost his job? Perhaps it was the second. We're not really sure. But the owner, despite the fact that he was upset with the dishonest manager and was letting him go, had to commend him for being creative in the situation. And we ask, well, how many owners in our world today would do something like that? Jesus goes on to say, whoever is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And whoever is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth. And so we think, oh, Jesus, why do you always have to bring it back to money? I thought we were talking about trust and responsibility and honesty and vindictiveness. And Jesus brings it back to money. I've preached on this parable a few times before, and so this week I was thinking back at looking at these verses and wondering what are the messages that are present here, because I think that there are some very important themes here, even though in verse 8 it gets very confusing when the owner praises the manager for acting shrewdly. First of all, I would say in verse 8, he says, the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Or to put this another way, if only Christians were as eager and as persistent in their spiritual lives as they are in their business lives and in their careers, they might be much better off. If only we would pay as much attention to our faith as we do the stock market and the next deal and the bottom line and the investments, we would be much better off. So many of us will spend 20 or 30 times the amount of time and energy and money on our pleasures and our hobbies, sports, vacations, than we do focusing on our relationship with God and focusing on our spiritual lives. People will say that their faith is important and say that their spiritual life is important, yet their behaviors don't back that up, because we let other things take priority in our lives. Jesus says the children of this age are more concerned with the things of this age than they are about eternity. We are so concerned about the things of this world, and we sometimes forget the timeless truth that this world is temporary, it's fleeting, nobody's promised tomorrow, and we simply don't know how long we'll be in it. But we forget that. Secondly, in verse 9, Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Or to say this another way, if your money and your material possessions completely define you and your friendships in this world, then what's going to define you in the world to come when these things don't really matter? The rabbis back in the first century had a saying that went like this: the rich help the poor in this world, but the poor help the rich in the world to come. St. Ambrose, who was a bishop of Milan in the 4th century, said this: the bosoms of the poor, the houses of the widows, and the mouths of the children are the barns which last forever. A person's true wealth does not consist in what he or she keeps, but in what he or she gives away and in the people that they help along the road of life. To whom much has been given, much is required. A member of this church, who's a friend of mine, has told me many times that he's convinced he has a lot of friends that know how to take it all with them when they die, because they are holding on to everything that they have in life with a death grip, even in the face of death itself. There's no feeling in life that equals the feeling of generosity and compassion, using what you have to bless the lives of other people. Thirdly, what about honesty? Honesty is very important. In verses 10 and 11, Jesus says, whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and whoever is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you with the true riches? We could summarize this by saying that a person's way of fulfilling a small task in life is the best indication of his or her ability to be entrusted with a larger task in life. This is true in business. Those who can do small things well are usually given the opportunity to do larger things. But Jesus expands this to talk about eternity. He says, here on earth, we are in charge of certain things that are not really ours. We cannot take these things with us when we die. They are only lent to us. We are just stewards. But in heaven, we will get what is eternally ours. And maybe what we get in heaven will depend on how we use the things that we are stewards of here on earth. There's a story that's told about a man who landed on an island, shipwrecked or something like that, and all of a sudden the people of the island converged upon him, and he was scared. He thought they were going to kill him or eat him, but they picked him up on their shoulders and they started chanting, "King, King, King." And they took him to a chair that was lofted in the middle of the village, and they said, "You will be our king for a year." And the guy felt great. I just landed on this island, now I'm the king. Well, as a few months went by, he began to wonder, well, so I'm king for a year, but what happens after that year is up? And so he asked somebody, he said, what happens to the kings after they've served their year? And they said, oh, well, you see that island over there? That's where we excommunicate all of our kings. And the man went to visit that island, and it was desolate and deserted. There was no food, there was nothing to eat, and it was pitiful. And so what did he start to do? He spent the rest of the time he had as king, and he started sending things forward. He sent materials to build houses and canoes, and he sent fruit trees to be planted. And so when his year as king was up, he was then excommunicated to an island of paradise. Maybe this is our trial run. Maybe in heaven we only get what we have given away in this world. Maybe in heaven we are the recipients of the way that we have treated other people. I don't know. We can only speculate about that, but I would not rule that out. In verse 13, Jesus concludes this parable by saying, "No slave can serve two masters. A slave will hate the one and love the other, be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth." And really, this is the heart of the message of this parable. This parable deals with issues of trust and responsibility and honesty. It's dishonesty and irresponsibility that gets the manager in this parable into trouble. But the message behind this parable is that you cannot serve both God and wealth. And that is a recurring theme throughout Jesus' teachings. It simply does not work because one of them always wins. And yes, it is possible to be wealthy without serving wealth. I don't know anybody who doesn't stress over money. Because whether you have a lot of it or a little, money's a stressful topic. And it's universal. But here's what I do know. Money in and of itself does not bring happiness. Some security, sure. Some opportunity, of course. Some status, yeah. But happiness, and even more importantly, joy, comes when we learn the value of trust and honesty, faith and responsibility, relationships and authenticity. It's when we develop an ongoing relationship with God and we put these things to work in our own lives. That's what matters. Amen.